will be handing over the mic to Amihan Lin, who is also working with Pinya.
No. Well, it was mentioned earlier that I did some work for Pinya in Rurungan, but when when I found out that Ms. Patis would be speaking, I figured I have to talk about something a little different, because the idea of creation and the relationship with art and design, when it comes kasi to Pinya, it was mostly my mom or my sister doing the work. So I figured I'd try to wrap my head around something that I personally could contribute to the conversation. So as a backgrounder, just mentioned that I did work on a project called Art in the Order of Nature, the indigenous textiles from the Mercedes Sobel collection. And currently, I'm also doing my master's, which incidentally involves innovation in Pinya. So I'm very excited to have heard your talk today. I learned a lot. So my conversation to this dialogue is more on the relationship of the process of research, looking at design or looking at art, and trying to transform it into something different. And for that, I'm drawing on my work. I do paint, so the slides will reflect the process that I go through, or I went through, to be able to take the research that I learned through working on this book, Art in the Order of Nature, because it dealt with indigenous textiles. It dealt with textiles from all around the Philippines that sometimes we may recognize, sometimes we might not recognize, but it's all Filipino. So, first slide. So, when we did the research, a lot of it involved basically the technical stuff. How is it made? Who makes it? What's it used for? So here you have the yakan. The yakan weaver, it's a contemporary weaver. And then this is the backstrap. Hello? Okay, so I only show the backstrap loom now because the two pieces I'll be showing you is made from a backstrap loom. Why is this important? I think it's very important to look at textiles in a sense that to appreciate it, to know what goes into it. And as for me, the project for me, this particular project, was to take this information and make it into something new. Not necessarily in relation to words, which we already did, but more of a creative process, through paintings, through color, through patterns, etc. So these three here in the middle, these are representations of weaves. So on top, this is a plain weave, but I used three colors to show the relationship. So when you do checkered patterns, you're usually using a plain weave. It's just up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down in the warp and weft. But in changing the patterns of the warp and the weft, you create the checkerboard or the plaid in the patajong. Yeah, the patajong of the Visayas, or the plaid of the Scottish. And then there's also in Korea, they also make this plaid pattern. And then the next one, this is a version of the tapestry weave. They do this in the Tausug area, where it's also done on a backstrap loom, unlike the standing loom which was shown in Ms. Patis' slide, where the weft textiles actually like intersect. So, and then the last one is an example of a diamond twill. A twill is, if any of you are wearing jeans, you can just touch the fabric of your jeans and you'll notice that there's a diagonal bend to the weave. But this one, instead of a diagonal, is a diamond. So this is a diamond twill. You see this in the Northern Luzon textiles, but you also see it throughout the Philippines. So anyway, the next one that's also very important for me was use and the history of textile usage in the Philippines. So up there, you have the Boxer Codex. This is one of the very first representations on how Filipinos wore clothing. I mean, not necessarily Filipinos, pre-Spanish. So they drew it, and then if I'm not, so this one, this is basically in the Visayas area. So this was like the representation of what people wore then. And then the next one, I got this photo from Hamilton's book, The Rainbow's Varied Hue, on southern Philippine textiles. So this is Maranao, I think. Maranao, Maguindanao. I can't remember exactly, but the plaids. So the wraparound, the tubular fabric, the patajong, the middle one. And then at the bottom, this is from Sinaunang Habi, which this is the gadang dress. And then the other one, this is the habol kahian, the sash of the tauso. Yeah, that's embroidered. That's not exactly necessarily woven. That was, I just got that from the internet. So basically, this slide just shows the research process that I went through, and I continuously go through. So next slide. So here, like I said, very important for me is color. And I think design, we think about color. So these diamonds represent color patterns in textiles. And it took me a while to really go through this. But Angel, if you could like change the slide. Okay, so now it's labeled. So top part is Northern Luzon. The bottom, I don't know if you can really see the blues, but the darker sections are blues. And these are watercolor, so they're not exact really. But so the bottom, you have reds, greens, yellows, and then the smaller sections, these are for design elements like embroidery or beading, while the larger sections is textile base, the tela itself. And then so the gadang, and also the sizes basically represent how much it's used in the textile itself. The gadang use a lot of white, but not just in tela, but also in their beading, in their embroidery. So the ilonggot, this is more on beading cap. In the middle, it's just small. One thing that you'll notice that throughout the Philippines, the most colorful is the ones of southern Philippines, particularly the area of Muslim Mindanao. The Yakan, the Tausug, the Maranao. So this is Maranao, Tausug, Yakan. This is not representative of all of the Philippine textile traditions. This is only the ones that I've gone through the process of isolating certain elements in their textile traditions. But so yeah, so interesting enough, again Mindanao, but more of the Lumad populations. It's a lot of red, a lot of black, a lot of natural colors. Not a lot of like pink or blue, but because it's very natural dye based. The same with the northern Luzon area. Again, this is also natural dye based. But whereas you have the Muslim Mindanao, there's a lot of trade. So they have commercial materials, and this is silk. So these are trade materials that they use, so that it gives them a bigger, a broader base for color. So next slide. And then the next portion I go through, and this one, I got this from working on that project, Art and the Art of Nature. I was exposed to a way of analyzing textiles, which I got from Dr. Patricia, who's here. So one way is to dissect the pattern, to look at the pattern and see how it can be recreated. I don't weave. I know how to weave, but I don't weave physically. So what I had to do is I had to like break down the patterns. These are the diamond patterns, mostly northern Luzon. So that's Kalinga, this is Kalinga, Gadang, Bontok, and this one is Bontok Kangkanay. Next slide, please. And then another one, this one is a combination of a more elongated diamond. On the top, your left, this is from the Tiboli. The next one is the Tausug. The one further, it's a little bit more. These are actually the same kind of pattern, but in different applications. The Yakan, that's the Yakan Inalaman. So basically you see the flower shape, or the star shape. So this is like reflected in these patterns. So this is part of the process that I went through to see, because I'm not part of that tradition. So I don't intrinsically know what these things mean. I had to simplify it, reprocess it, to be able to transform it into something else. So next slide, please. So this is the process that I typically go through, not all the time, just with some. So I create a pencil grid. Next slide, please. And then I apply the color. Next slide, please. Sorry. And then, so this is a bit more, so this is the textile itself. The color's a bit off because my camera's not that great. But you see it's a lot of reds. This is the saputangan of the yakan. So this is a modern version of a headcloth. This is, when I say modern, sorry, not modern, contemporary version. This is made now with the same purpose in an attempt of replicating an old textile. Because that's what te'eb means, old, of the old, ideally. Okay, so next slide, please. So like I broke it down to see the whole elements within the textile, and then I applied the color. Next slide, please. And then I broke it down further, smaller. So this way, you can actually see the design elements of the textile. I actually did this for one of my classes when I was taking my master's, and my teacher was, but anyway, next slide please. And so these are samples, these are sections of different versions of the seputangan. This is actually more specific now. The one closer to me is the oldest version that I have. This is just a section of it. So you notice the designs are actually smaller, they're more intricate. It looks like there's a lot more color, but that's only really because they're smaller, and you can actually, the distribution of color is a little bit more equal. So you don't see the dominance of the red, but the red is actually the base of this textile. Then the next slide is the te'eb, which I showed you earlier. There's more red. This is also because the change of material. Because it's no longer cotton, it's most likely rayon. And because of being frugal, or being more economic about it, they have a tendency to widen the background. And then the next one is the most common version of the seputangan that you have in the market today. If you'll notice, there's no more of the leaf element. Of the leaf, essentially, so it becomes diamonds, blocks, triangles. So it's a simplification of design. So this is actually one of the things that happens in terms of traditional crafts when you're coming into a more commercial market. They call this like simplification, because it's easier to make, it's faster to produce, and it's more economic. So next slide, please. So this is just a composite of the whole process that I went through with this particular piece. Like I said, it's very important. There are three things: color, pattern, and use. And I think this is largely because of my background in research, but I think this is something that a lot of designers and artists go through. It's a thoughtful process. The process of creation is a very thoughtful process. My aunt often says that one of the major purposes of design is to solve a problem. And in art, it's almost the same thing. You're solving a problem, which sometimes it's intrinsic, it's your problem, because you have to find a solution to your light bulb moment. Oh, I want to do this, but how do I do it? So in between that light bulb moment and that, ta-da, it's there, you go through a lot of different steps. And for me, it's very, let's call it what it is. It's kind of anal, because I do a lot of research. So last slide. So this is the finished product. This is a piece that I did on the seputangan. It incorporates all those factors. All of the patterns are based on different versions of the seputangan that I looked at, researched, from pictures to the actual thing. And also I incorporated the use by keeping that area blank, so that you can actually have an idea. I don't know if you can really see it, but an image incorporated in the very center of it. So
And then the flip side to it, when you do a lot of research, textiles in the Philippines, there's a lot of versions, but there's two ways to look at them sometimes. A lot of the textiles in the Philippines, particularly the traditional textiles, are ritual-based. They're very deep in meaning, and there's a lot of ceremony that go with them. And as a student of Philippine studies, Philippine culture, Philippine history, you don't want to tread on that. I personally don't want to tread on that. So there's also a difference in how I approach the headcloth, which is more or less commercialized. It's used by the people, it has significant meaning, but it's not associated to ritual. Not necessarily. But when the next piece, and in the next slide, is the Tiboli Kumo, which is very ritualized. It's very, in a sense, it's very sacred. There's a lot of meaning attached to it. There's a lot of taboo attached to it. Even the whole process of creating or extracting abaca. Oh, I missed that, almost that. So here, my approach is a little bit different. There's not a lot of breakdown. The last slide, actually I want the last slide, yay, I did it. The patterns are whole. Unlike the sa Kutangan, the patterns are broken down. But with the Tiboli Kumo, the patterns are whole. So I think, just to finish, because I have like, what, 2 minutes left. For me, a lot of research really has to go into how we think about how we approach art and design, especially if we're dealing with cultural aspects of Philippine culture. Because while we are ideally contemporizing certain aspects of culture so that they can be appreciated or consumed by a bigger population, we also have to be careful about certain elements. Not to overtake that meaning and not to overexploit it in a sense. So I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to do that, but that's one of the things that research and reading about it has helped me do. So there, thank you.
Thank you, Amihan. For our last speaker, is Christina Peralba.
Yes, that's it. Okay. That's my cover page. Maybe we can go on to the... Okay, I started off with this intro to a book called Arkitekturang Filipino, which was undertaken by one of my former students. And I encourage him to really get us through this. And if you know I started this on putting it together for him. It's a layout of how he's going to do the book so that there is a better appreciation of Philippine architecture. And architecture is what I believe, okay, this is my belief, it's a conveyance of the past to the future. It's something that you give to the future. Because architecture is something that is permanent. And I would remember talking to some architects like, you can erase most of the artworks that you're working on and change your mind, and you can reconfigure it. But there's something that once you have come to a concept to follow, then you can never erase that. If you do a good piece of architecture, well and good. It's a trophy. But then, if you make a mistake, it is forever staring at you in the face, all the ugliness and all the defects of a structure. And what had happened in the Philippines, this is actually in line of Filipino architecture because it's only like about 15, 20 years ago, that we started in UP to start looking for what is Filipino architecture. And I started it with doing a survey, just cataloging, putting together a whole listing of different architecture, different kinds, different uses, as far north as Batanes and down south as Bonggao. And we were able to amass something like about 1,500 different structures all over the Philippines that dates back beyond 50 to 100 years old. And we were able to put together a database of 1,500 pieces of architecture of that age. But the saddest thing that happened, this was in year 2000 when we started it. By 2005, I cross-checking it again. Some of my students took over the process of documenting. And I said, can you start checking what's happening to them? And we found out that a good 40% have been wiped out already. They're no longer in existence. And now, culture of architecture is very, very intricate. And when you go all over the country, at that point in time, nobody knew what is Filipino architecture. They think that Bahay Kubo is Filipino architecture. Well, yes and no. But it was something much more than that. And in our consolidation, we said, hey, look, from the pre-colonial period to the Spanish period to the American period, look at the houses. Houses is so close to the people. It bespeaks of your culture, okay? And now, when you look at the form, has not really changed. The Bahay Kubo, it's small. You have the Bahay na Bato, it's made out of bato and all that. But in the basic areas of a piece of architecture, it is replicated in the different types that are being built during the different period. But in essence, they are still the same. And even up to now, you can see good architecture that still explains what is Filipino architecture. And this is actually a product of really very generous in spaces, very open. We put doors, but we keep our doors open. Up to now, this still goes on. And so you can see this individuality of the Filipino that has replicated itself no matter from what part of the Philippines do they come from. They still would be molded by their culture. And so we move on. Our ancestors, of course, they had to grapple with the usual. We still have that now. The different disasters that we're talking about. The Ibatans were able to bury their houses. They don't have the lower floor and upper floor, but it's something that you see from the outside. Inside, they have excavated the lower portion where they keep it as storage, and during the colder months, they would have a cooking house, they call it. And they stay there during the cooler months like November, December, January, February. And they sleep around the cooking house because there's always fire there, and they dry their vegetables, they dry their fish, their meat. So this is where they live. They don't live in the main house. And I think that thing is still ongoing right now. And also, they found out that these Filipinos, we are very meek. We are meek, but very hard-headed. You cannot force them to do anything. Yes, they will tell you, they will be very gracious, accepting, yes, we'll do it this way. Okay, we'll do it this way. But then, deep within, in the end, when they come out with something, it's something that is uniquely their own, even in architecture. Next. So this is a backgrounder of what is Philippine architecture. Now, you would notice that there is such a big gap between the other arts and architecture because it is now defined as a profession. The profession is warranted because it's important in safeguarding life, health, property, and public welfare. So you have, this is an art experience wherein you can be sued for this, for doing this, if it would break any of those things at the bottom. If you hurt people, if you create unhealthy environment, property welfare. And so what happens here now is that you become more contrived in designing an architectural piece, okay? Because you have to safeguard the human needs, and you should be able to give certain things that are not really specifically being given by the arts. And so you are asked to have a license, wherein you can have a case against you for, you know, hurting people or destroying things. So it becomes a profession. And this is where we come into a situation where we don't now think of architecture. There's another layer that has come in recently, which is urban design. Urban design and architecture. Because at the rate that our centers are growing, it is hard to distinguish what is architecture and what is urban design. Because you would have to think of continuity of lines, continuity of function. You have to make room for other people, and you have to fit them in an essence of art. So we have, I became part of this. This was put together by Holcim Foundation. We were talking about sustainable architecture and sustainable construction. It started as sustainable construction. And if you would notice, you have these 5 things. But the one that would tie it up all together would be the lowest portion, which is the contextual aesthetic impact that is most important. It should have a high, when you talk of high architectural quality, it is not just giving, you know, an abode or creating spaces for a lot of people, or you create spaces for things that goes on inside. You have to think about it. How many people would be using this? How would it be used? How would you make it effective? And again, there are a lot of essential things that are in the art that has to be put in together in order to have a successful piece of architecture. And so, if you know this year, you have quantum change and transferability. So we look forward to certain changes. But these changes should be a change for the better. And here now you have ethical standards and social equity also. So that you don't put a very, very tall building next to a regular residence. But then these things keep on going because the essence of urban design has been totally forgotten. You know, each architect would like to create his own statue, his own trophy, and they don't seem to think of the continuity of the line. And it's sad because once upon a time, the Philippines was, not the Philippines, Manila was supposed to have been called in some papers as the Paris of the Orient because of the beautiful buildings at that point in time. And during that point in time, after that, a lot of Filipinos were brought to the Western world as pensionados so that they would immerse in what we know now as the architecture that they have taken up during that time. Next. Okay. Now, I am showing you two projects that we have come across. One is the Avignon Tower. I, with a group, okay, has done this in the late 1970s, when everything was following other forms of architecture. And I said, why can't we not go away with the rectangular things, square them off? But you can mold them into a form that is useful, and something pleasing to the eye. And there's order, there's way of inventing things, putting it together, because now you have other values that have come up. There are philosophies, economics, politics, technology, and aesthetics of architecture has gone through a lot of, there it is, radical transformation. It is something that you will be looking forward, that transformation. But having gone through all the architecture of the different period, you would notice that transformation may be the external features or additional spaces. Like during the Spanish period, you have a lot of churches, you have a lot of other institutions that are really more for a smaller community, of trying to inform the people of how to live together. Because the early Filipinos used to have their own little clan somewhere, and they have their own area where they have their food, they have where they get their daily meals, and they have their own practices. But then when the Spaniards came in, they wanted the people to be within the mandate of the King of Spain, to live together, bajo la campaña. So they were taught to live in a community. But the Filipino basically has not evolved from that community that you live alone already because of the lack of spaces. But then when you enter the marginalized area, right now, if you see them, they would have a replication of what it was even before the Spaniards came. They live together. Usually, the Visayans would be grouped together, the Ilocanos would be living together, and when you move them into a multi-level, clean, antiseptic building, somehow they would manage to sell their unit and go back to the neighborhood unit. So we cannot seem to find, at the moment, a solution for our marginalized environment, because they are replicating a certain culture that we have grown up with. So it replicates itself. So again, now there has been a change. You see, I was talking about the licensure, which really clamps your hands down, and you have to follow certain procedures, but you can work around that. And it was so obvious, actually, in the 70s, when we had a lot of architects during that time, like architect Roxin, you have all these architects who are pensionados, and we have a whole lot of beautiful buildings around during that time. And the architects during that time were allowed to design what they feel is right for a certain area. But then it has come to a point when the whole city was getting filled up, and unfortunately, it should have been a mega city that has been organized as one entity. We have Quezon City as one area with Makati, and all the surrounding areas when we had the Metro Manila Commission. When you had one governor and one manager for the whole thing, because a city cannot be subdivided, much more a mega city. Yes, you can subdivide them into names, but not in management. And so it distracts you from the whole procedure. And so when politics comes in, this is a very big change in the future. Because before, traffic and walkways and all that, and you have traffic and utilities of water and drainage and all these things that are happening has to be integrated as one whole. But when it was subdivided into political units, each one are individual, marginalized area, unfortunately. Marginalized because it has not achieved. Yes, you have beautiful centers right now, but it's so sad to see this disparity between the organized by Western standard, that we have these cities and rational, no? But then you cannot just close your eyes to the marginalized areas that are on the fringes. What do we do with them? But they have come to build their own architecture, and if you just take the picture in black and white and try to color them, the artist, you have paintings of them, you would see how exciting is the mix of their own architecture that they have built. This is something that they like. They could not seem to adjust, and you start transporting people out of the city, away from where they want to be, where you have to be together. So there has to be a common ground for that. Those are the things that have to be understood by architecture. And as we have been looking at this, now there is a move, like for myself, I find it very fulfilling to be working out of the urbanized center and creating areas out of the urbanized center into, we call them resort communities. But actually, it is not a resort community. It is another community that has all the amenities of open space, air, no pollution, like what we did in Lipa. I think we have students here from Batangas. They have an excellent area with clean air and all the amenities that you want to have. You have clean water, you have a good mountain behind you. And what we did in the place was not to move the total configuration of the land. We did not want to touch the configuration of the land, and that is how the golf course came about. We said, oh, we can have a golf course because of the configuration and have all the residences around it and within it. It's not segregating the residential area from the play area. The play area is part of the residential area. And so people start to gravitate towards that. We identified those lakes are not natural lakes. They are the lowest part of the land before. And we turned them into irrigation lakes. So, as an architect, you can be an artist. It is so fulfilling to do this on a bigger scale. Because sometimes you don't realize that, hey, we can do this, why not? Okay, so we dug it a little deeper, and we have 5 lakes within the 200-hectare property. And in between, you have residential areas whose residents now are always complaining that they have golf balls in their yard. And we said, if you want to stay in a place like this, you have to suffer the golf balls. But then you have clean air, You have no flooding. No flooding because there was an elevation of 40 meters between one end of the property to the other side. So there was a natural flow that would bring out all the excess water to the nearest river. So again, this is the challenge of those who are into architecture. It is for you to be able to transform a natural area into something that is livable and acceptable and making people more human to be staying in there. Then you realize that, hey, I'm a human being, that I have air, I have clean air, I have greens around me. And unfortunately, we have these fake walls of plants, and occasionally they would die out. I said, how can you torture plants in a cement world, you know, hardscape? Architecture is always related to hardscape, but that's not true. You can have open areas. You can create your own open areas. You can just see also the culture of the people. Why is the airport so clogged up? They're clogged up by people who bring in people to the airport. Why does a whole jeepney of relatives have to be with somebody leaving? But then most of my friends who are from other countries, they said this is the most heartwarming thing that we see. That when people come to greet you as a whole group, that's what we are. We like to relate, we like to be among ourselves and greet you, and you know, we have that essence of we will miss you if you are leaving. We are the most homesick race in the world, even though we are all over the world. The Filipinos are always homesick. Okay, so again, these are things that unfortunately architects don't seem to understand. That's the reason why that you have all this inventiveness that are going on right now. You have this global city, you have all this, but I am afraid that one day when something happens in the future and we become part of the heritage, the next generation will be able to unearth only malls. Would you believe that there are no more spaces for malls in most of the urban areas around the country? Because everything are mall. And one of the most human thing that had happened because of the mall is the shop houses are gone. Shop houses, that's a Filipino home. You know, the upper floor is where they live, they work downstairs. They watch their children grow. They teach their children their art or whatever they're working on. Gone. You can't do this in a mall. But this is the culture. And somehow there are places still that still do this. And it is quite heartwarming to see them defy. Like in Quiapo, they have a big fight over a tall building coming up next to a beautiful old house. But what can you do? That's the law. And there's one thing that is most, I think something that really scares me right now. The concept of corporate practice in architecture. You can be a corporation and you work, you do the toilet, I do the living room, you do the lobby, I'll do the penthouse. And so you have this whole hodgepodge of spaces. And your neighbor, you don't even know who they are. And so, again, this is the other challenge to architecture. And I've seen this deteriorating. A few years ago, I retired from teaching. I've been teaching for 30 years in UP. and I've been practicing right after high school. In my second year in college, I was already working as an apprentice, so I really like the romance of creating stone, cement, wood into something that can be a haven for a person or for a group of people. It's something when they go out and say, hey, it's well, I mean, say the air conditioning is good. It's hitting you not in the face, but you know, it just makes the room cooler. This is technology coming in, but then as an architect, you can do this. You can really actually manipulate how people will act with your architecture unknowingly, because when you put a door there, no way would they pass through the wall. They would have to pass through the door. So you manipulate a lot of people. You do a lot of things within one space, and that is one of the things that you create. Unknowingly, those architects don't seem to understand that these are things that should be understood. It was 5 years before I retired. I started to be sad because every child that comes in as freshman, 90% that I have talked to, I would ask them, why are you taking up architecture? Most of the time before, they would answer, oh, so I can maybe design a building, maybe design my parents' house, or design something that is unusual, and you know, they have these dreams of creating something new. On that 5 years of my last years in UP, all I heard from students was, this is a course that when you start off with a better salary than most professions. You don't spend too much for the training, but then when you work, you get a lot of money out of this. So it's a commercial value of architecture that is deteriorating the artistic side of what it is, what the architect, the designer would like to share on a bigger group of people. So with that, this line that I placed, it harnessed multicultural inventiveness that is now transformed into generic structures, no memories of the past, nor deliver a gift to the future. This piece of line that I put in here was something like 20 years ago, and it is happening now. So, especially with the growth of these corporate activities in the art, it muddles the whole thing now. It is no longer from the soul, but it is from the point of view of something that is so with that, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alba.